Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing horror discussions, bringing you the best thoughts, theories, and literary analysis this side of the juke joint.
It is really amazing that this was the best vampire movie of the year and not one that we saw a few months ago that we won't name.
Starting things on a down note, I see.
No, I loved this. It was great.
Sinners is absolutely fantastic. It was my favorite cinematic experience I've had this year.
Yeah,
With a packed crowd. We saw it on a Thursday night. It was just a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And going into this, we had watched this great video of Ryan Coogler, the writer and director, talking about all the different... he just went into this, he was a big movie nerd guy, right? So he went into here's the IMAX stuff we did, here's the different types of film. It was like a 10-minute video of him just passionately talking about different ways to film a movie and how they thought through it all for...
The perforations in the film
yes,
strips.
It was so
that
great.
Passion. That's a perfect word to start with, because I just felt the film was infectious.
Mm-hmm.
It was so exciting. The score from Ludwig Göransson, who did the music for Mandalorian, he did the music for Oppenheimer.
Mm-hmm.
He was so locked in here, and the music was so rousing. The film looked beautiful, shot on that old film stock. It was just a great time, but there's one element I really wanted to talk about instead of just gushing for a few minutes.
Sure.
I wanted to talk about the blues in particular, because so much of the film is about the blues. And chewing on it for a few days, now, we wait before we record just to see what ideas fall out of the brain tree. I feel like Sinners feels less like a horror or vampire film to me. It obviously is those things.
Right.
But over time, it feels less like that and more like a blues biopic.
I think you're so right. The horror elements here were great and wonderful, and I was so glad to see them, but I felt like there was a whole lot more to this movie. And I don't mean to say that something that's strictly horror is lacking something, but there were layers to this movie.
It's a sense of scale. The film's huge. I mean, they show you the IMAX shots and how much more, there's a grandiose scale to so much of the film, but I think that extends to the thematic content as well. Where when I say it's a blues biopic, I don't mean necessarily just of one musician,
sure,
even though it kind of is that as you chart Sammie's sort of rise through the genre. But I feel like it's almost, again, with the scale idea, broader than that. It's almost a biopic of the genre. It's about the origins of the genre, and especially, and this is where it gets subjective, what I think is that essential connection to death that is built into the blues genre.
Oh, cool.
Bringing in a little of my personal history here in comparison, after my mom died, I got really into the blues. And I felt like I understood it more. Because I'd heard some of the staples. My dad was into blues before that. But I really got more out of the genre after that. And I'm talking deep in years into Delta blues and the oldest recordings I could find and bootlegs and concerts and all of it.
Didn't you make a diddly bow?
Yes, I did.
I think you did.
Yes,
yeah.
I did. I made a diddly bow with my dad. And even tracking it through other genres where you go into hip hop, I think metal is very much an offshoot of the blues. Seeing the tendrils, kind of that tree of how blues has permeated through the rest of culture, that very much is rooted for me in death. And even going personal, again, a loss you and I have experienced recently, when we were thinking about that and kind of preparing for that before the person died, we were in the car driving, and I just played you a bunch of blues. And I was just riffing, throwing together things, because there's some amount of music that I always keep downloaded on my phone, just in case I don't have a wireless connection or whatever. I just like that sense of security of having some music always there, just in case, no matter what happens. And a lot of that music was blues. So I was taking you through a tour of all the blues that means a lot to me and helped me process and understand that sort of grief. And it was funny because one of those artists was Buddy Guy, who then popped up in Sinners.
Right. It really was. It really is perfect for that, because there is a sadness to the blues, absolutely. But more than anything, it just feels like a meditation on death, and it forces you to, or maybe encourages you to think about it, but in a way that feels, it's neither good or bad, but it's just kind of comforting, and just you sit in it and you're aware of it and you're processing it.
Yeah, processing, because there is an exposure element to that where you need to be almost meditating on this subject. I think blues, and I think the film takes pains to make this distinction, blues is about more than just sadness or literally like feeling blue.
Sure.
It's deeper than that. And I think the vignettes that the characters exchange through the film, it's about pain, it's about loss, it's about grief. It's much more about death.
And I think it's about memory too. That's
Sure.
what was stuck out to me. And maybe you're going to get into this, but a lot of the stuff about like going back to our roots, going back to where we came from, like that memory, like cultural memory, familial memory, that's there in the blues as well, which I really like.
And there are references to kind of outsiders who hear the blues and kind of like the music but don't seem to get it. You know, that other level of understanding. And I feel like the film explicitly charts that education while nodding to the lineage and all of the real history of the genre. I loved the almost conflict at the beginning between Delta Slim and Sammie, where there's almost a gatekeeping element where Slim is saying like, you're too young, you don't have the almost required experience for the blues.
Yeah, he says like, what do you know about the blues? Yeah.
And it's an idea that the genre is incredibly individual and delicate, and that understanding is very closely held. But I think that individuality is very much in tension with how universal the genre feels and how much it does appeal to everyone. I mean, that this is the power of music. So I love the tension that the movie foregrounds between the individual and the universal parts. Because looking back across the movie here, almost all of our principal characters lose someone through the course of the film. Smoke loses, spoilers, I guess.
Yeah, sorry.
Smoke loses Stack, his brother. We find out that he's lost his child, and then he loses Annie. Sammie loses Perline, and then Delta Slim. And Grace loses Bo.
Yes.
So through the course of the film, they all almost earn that experience with the blues that Delta Slim was talking about. They kind of they have enough experience with death that they earn their way into the genre by the end of the story. So when we zoom forward in that mid-credit scene, I can't believe how important this mid-credit scene. Stay through the credits, by the way. There's another great one after the credits.
Yes. There's stuff like mid-credits, and then there's stuff additionally, yeah.
But when we zoom forward to meet old Sammie, who's played by Buddy Guy, I feel like it kind of paid off this biopic angle that I'm talking about. But it also feels earned, because it's completing the transformation from young, kind of green Sammie at the beginning all the way to this wisdom, this hard-fought wisdom that he has at the end, where he's steeped in the genre. He's experienced it. He's done that meditation that we're talking about. But it also kind of feels like young Sammie is gone. Like even the changeover between actors versus other movies we've seen lately, something like The Brutalist, where they use makeup to age an actor.
Yeah.
I really liked the changeover between young Sammie and Buddy Guy, not just because it's Buddy Guy, who I love, but also because it feels like he's shed his skin, kind of
he's
evolved.
Transformed, yeah.
Yes, he's changed, where there isn't that young Sammie to go back to. This experience has fundamentally changed him.
Yeah. And if you contrast it with, again, I guess this is kind of a spoiler, but in the end, you've got, young Haley Steinfeld. What's her character's name? Mary. It's her and then Stack, who are vampires, and so they have not aged. And so you have their young bodies contrasted with, the elderly body of Buddy Guy. It's not young Sammie anymore. And so they've gone on different paths and some have transformed and some have not. And that's interesting.
It's different but related paths. And this is exactly where I was heading. This is where I wanted to end up here.
Cool.
Because the monkey wrench to this whole idea and this navigation of the blues in the film, for me anyway, is Stack and Mary walking into the club. Because we've seen the experience they've gone through in the film. They've come to represent that experience with death as well. But the difference is they haven't aged a day. They're not in their late 90s.
Right.
There's something, if we're talking about the relationship between the physical representation of the characters and the blues as a genre, it's interesting that two of these characters come in completely frozen and unchanged after all that time, and the other one is shaped and evolved and aged and steeped in it. But they discuss the blues. They share the blues. They talk about following all of Sammie's career. And I think for me, what Stack and Mary represent here is the act of listening to music. Like I talked about before with Buddy Guy's Sweet Tea. That's my favorite Buddy Guy album. Howlin' Wolf, the Hendrix Blues compilation, which was one of the first records I ever bought. the magic for me of listening to the blues is that it is perfectly preserved, that it's about death and it becomes this almost artifact where a performance is captured in the moment, on the grooves of a vinyl record, on a CD, in the moment, captured live to tape. And when you listen to them now, it's just the same as it was. You have that kindred kind of relationship with everyone else who's ever listened to that record, with the musicians themselves when they're recording it. In that moment, they are still alive, they're still there, they're still powerful. And I think that experience of listening to music and cherishing this artifact of a creative performance, it means that creativity, that passion, that blues is immortalized. So having these characters who are immortal walking in and discussing the blues with this man who was aged into being an artifact of the genre, for me that perfectly crystallized the beauty, the tension, the paradox of the blues.
I love that. Well, and this is making me think two things. One is I was wondering why in that scene they don't try to transform Buddy Guy. What's it? Sonny? They don't. Sammie. Thank you. They don't try to transform him. They don't try to bite him. And I was curious about that. And I'm thinking maybe here it's like they're saying you're already doing what we're doing through your music. We don't need to transform you. I think maybe that's one way you could look at it.
They're two sides of the same coin.
Right. Yeah. And then the other thing this is making me think about, and maybe you're going to get to this.
No, that's all I have.
Okay. Well, I think that's the best scene in this movie is about in the middle of the movie where Sammie is singing and playing in the club, and you have this whole like surreal one take, beautifully choreographed dancing montage where we're sort of going through time and space and going back to different cultures and going forward in time. And so you've got like a hip hop dancer coming in. You've got somebody from like West Africa, drumming with, and singing, right? And you've got like different time periods and music genres being represented as like evolutions of the blues or the roots of the blues. And it just weaves in and out throughout all of these people. And it's so, so beautiful. And to me, that makes sense. If you're talking about this sort of transportational aspect and power of the blues, that makes total sense. And that's like sort of, that's the thesis of the movie. It opens with this voiceover from, I think, Annie, talking about there are some people who have this power in them to sort of transport you to a different place and time through their music. And that's what Sammie has. And he's able to do that all the way through the end of the movie. I think that makes total sense.
I just love what this film had to say about the blues. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to take this time to just, open up. It's kind of personal. It's kind of subjective, but the film really, really spoke to me. And I thought Ryan Coogler just did an incredible job here.
Yeah, it was a beautiful movie. I really, really enjoyed it. And so then, the vampire thing makes total sense. I think there's sort of, most of the time, like about half of the movie, there is no horror. There are no vampires. There's like little hints at it to keep you interested and to like plant the seeds, but it's doing so many other things. But I think the vampire thing makes total sense because it is about death and immortality and how things survive after people have died. And so it makes a lot of sense to have that in here. It was a really special experience. Solid movie.
Yeah, see this in a theater on a biggest screen you can find.
Yeah, find IMAX if you can. We didn't see it in IMAX, and I wish we had. So yeah, this is fun. Thanks for taking us through that.
If you're interested in our horror discussions, we have plenty of them over on the YouTube channel, on the podcast feed, and even more piled up over in the bonus episodes on Patreon. Mm-hmm. Tons of horror. I mean, it's dozens and dozens of horror movies we've talked about over there. Thank you very much for joining us. I guess transition into a plug. My latest book, Lemon Tarts in Space, is out right now. It is Ridley Scott's Alien by way of Monty Python. I really poured a lot of myself into it. It is also very much about death and cancer, but through this very silly kind of dark humor approach. It's very goofy. It's very loud. It's very passionate. I don't know. I put a lot of myself into this one. So that's available as an audio drama, as a novel, as an ebook, any way you want to get it. All of those links are in the bio. Thank you very much for listening, for supporting the show, and we'll be back here in just a few days with another brand new episode.